I consciously decreased my cash compensation just after getting a big promotion at a different company to go to a very early stage company deliberately because I knew I would be working really hard. It would be the hardest work I've ever done. I'd be surrounded by people who are way smarter than I am in service of knowing I would learn more during that period of time than I could in any other mechanism.
Welcome to the Going Long Podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And I am your host, Billy Keels. Wow, I'm so excited about today's conversation, and I really am looking forward to sharing it with you. I know you're going to get so much out of it. And you know what? I guess before we even get there, I just have to thank you. I want to continue to thank you for continuing to invest your time here, download the episodes, share the episodes with family, with friends, and even get to talk about the episodes with other family and friends. I've heard some people are doing that, which is fantastic. I really love that. You know what? And also one of the reasons that we continue to move up the charts, continue to have more and more people around the globe listening, interacting, and taking action is because of you. You continue to leave your honest written reviews as well as ratings. If you have not had a chance to do that, especially if you're on the Apple Podcast platform, just go ahead. We made a really quick video. It makes it really easy, but we'd love to have your honest written review as well as your rating. If you've been listening for any amount of time in any episode, we'd really love for you to do that. So appreciate that. Also, to a number of you are asking about how you can find previous episodes. Just go to billykeels.com. Once you're there, go to the podcast tab. You can find it, and you'll see every single episode, the audio, the video version. Go to billykeels.com. Once you get to the podcast tab, you'll be able to pick things up there and see every single episode ever published. So, and then lastly, a lot of you are accredited investors and you want to find out how you can connect with more accredited investors and how you can also gain access to special opportunities that we're talking about here. Well, if you send me an email to aiclub@billykeels.com, just put in the headline that you want to, or in the subject that you want to talk about the Accredited Investor Club, would be fantastic. I'll get in touch with you personally and we'll get a chance to talk about you joining our Accredited Investor Club. So once again, send an email to aiclub@billykeels.com. As for today's conversation, so many of you are IT sales professionals. You're in high paid, busy roles, if not maybe your professional services. But today we have an ex-IT sales professional, sales leader, worked in channel sales, worked in support, done a number of different roles in the area. And I know that you're going to really understand a lot about this story. Tells us about how he retired from the corporate world early on and is still now not only taking all that corporate experience, really helping him today manage businesses across the globe. And that's helping him to help other investors today, investing in real assets. Really gets vulnerable with this, shares some real life stories about his dark decade, he and his family's dark decade. He also talked to us about what it was like growing up as a teenager in the house of a father who was actually a real estate professional, was a broker for over 30 years, and how that shaped his life and the things that he is able to do now today. He even took a 1-year trip. Was paid a lot of money early on, and he decided he was going to take a quick sabbatical. He took a 1-year trip and left California, moved to Europe, and was just kind of hanging out, which was great. And then he also talks about what happened when he went back to the United States and how that has helped to formulate his worldview and how he is once again taking that experience and he is now helping others. Today's guest is Spencer Hilligoss, the founder and co-founder and principal at Madison Investing. And we're going to get to that conversation just after this. Whether you're an active investor or a passive investor, you really like your day job and you want to continue to go into your day job every single day feeling better, knowing that you've created the right options for yourself. At the same time, you just don't have enough time to really get your head around, spend all the hours investing long distance. Well, one way or the other, over the last number of years that I have been investing long distance, I've really understood a number of the major mistakes that you should avoid if you want to get to creating the right options for yourself much faster and being able to create more income sooner. And if you want to do that, if you want to understand more about that, I've made it really simple. You can just go to billykeels.com/7 mistakes to avoid. You can learn all the things that the 7 major mistakes that I've seen over and over again that I want you to avoid. Once again, you can go to billykeels.com/7 mistakes to avoid. So if you want to know how to leverage sales and sales leadership experiences to build the life of your dreams using long distance investing strategies, then guess what? Today's the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? This is going to be a really, really awesome conversation because today's guest started his career as an account executive for a company based in Menlo Park, California. And since then, he's also had various roles working in channel sales, direct sales, sales support. And then guess what? After 13 years of a corporate career, he decided to, take that corporate career, the tech career, and go ahead and leave it behind. And since then, he's been a full-time real estate investor who's partnered on over 6,000 doors and over $800 million in assets and transactions. And he is the co-founder and principal of Madison Investing. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Mr. Spencer Hilligoss. Spencer, welcome to the show, man.
Billy, we finally figured it out. I'm so
we finally made it. I'm so excited.
A couple of busy lives and careers and changes going on in this crazy world.
All kinds of stuff. You just don't understand how excited I am. And I am really looking forward to today's conversation because I know that the entire Going Long family is going to get so much out of this. So really, really happy that you're here, man. So welcome. And as you know, Spencer, we got to get into getting to know you even more. And we do that. I'm going to ask you 2 questions in the beginning. Going to ask you 3 at the end. And then in the middle, I have absolutely no idea what questions I'm going to ask you, but I do know that the Going Long family is going to get a chance to know you a whole lot better. And you're going to be able to share a lot of tactics, strategies, and actions that have helped you to get to this point in your journey. And I'm really looking forward to it. So if you're ready, we can go ahead and jump into the conversation. You ready, man?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I figured you'd say that. So here's the thing, help us understand, where do you live in the United States?
Yeah, I don't live as in some places cool sounding as where you are, but I live in Alameda, California. I'm in the Bay Area. So I grew up in Silicon Valley, actually just a bit north of the official Silicon Valley, but I would say basically south of San Francisco.
All right. Fantastic. So you kind of grew up with this kind of IT stuff in your bones, sort of speak, before it was even super popular. Appreciate that. So Alameda Park, and then help us understand, because I love positivity. So I would love for you to share with us, what is the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
We just went on a 10-day, maybe 11-day trip for the holidays. And I think I was not that plugged in more than needed, meaning focused, hardcore professional work. I was with family, extended family. I think spending that time with our kids, we have a 4-year-old, 7-year-old boys, and just going out and having fun and enjoying the holidays with loved ones. Coming back from that happened in the last 24 hours. And I think that reflecting on that and just coming back home and being like, that was a chunk of time. It was a chunk of time that was focused on the people that we love. And I think there's, that moment of realizing that coming home was probably the most positive I've had in the last 24.
Man, that is absolutely awesome. Not just the fact that you were able to spend that a last 11 days getting high quality family time, but also having the moment to, since you've been back, to really reflect on how important that was, being able to spend quality time with your wife, with your kids, especially at 4 and 7, man. Those are precious, precious ages, as well as with your in-laws. So I appreciate you sharing that with us and getting a chance to know that some of the things that are important to you. And Spencer, listen, man, I give myself this really impossible task, really, really impossible task to try and tell your entire backstory in 3.5 seconds.
Okay.
Not possible, right? I tried it. Definitely not possible. You've done way too much. You've impacted way too many lives positively. So what I would love for you to do is, if you could tell your own backstory in your own words, share that with the Going Long family. And then also too, one of the things I would love for you to share with us is, as you tell your backstory, if you could maybe talk to us about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey, and then we'll see where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah, well, I love the big decision point of that, Billy. Absolutely happy to hit on that one. So so I originally, believe it or not, I grew up in a real estate household. So my dad was a real estate broker, residential broker, in the Bay Area for over 30 years. Prior to that, there's a lot of more interesting family lore in history, which I can't take credit for, and we probably don't want to go into on here due to time. But he was actually in the carnival business before that, with multi-generations in the carnival business. So that was a separate tangent that we probably don't want to spend time on here today, but always happy to come back to it. I was working in my dad's business as early as a teenager, and so he had me working open houses and stuff. It scared me away from real estate. Entirely. It's not cool to tell your friends, that you work in real estate when you happen to be in, the global center of technology that is Silicon Valley. So went away from that, dove into, after college, into a tech career, did not expect whatsoever that I was going to be taking, frankly, I was not planning on taking a sales job. I've never identified myself in my career as like a quote unquote salesperson. But that's how I found myself thriving and growing. And ultimately 13 years later, of all things, Billy, like it was financial tech companies largely. And for a guy who really originally had no interest in finance, I mean, I got to say that it's a blast. It was a blast. It was a blast. It was challenging. Went through 5 different companies, software companies. A few were like the quote unquote unicorns. And now reflecting all that time, building and growing and coaching people, like I look back and like that is by far the most rewarding aspect of all that stuff, was hiring, growing teams, operations teams, and sales groups across these companies. But it was hard. It was really, really hard. And one of the key decision points that we'll come back to in a very brief moment is, how and when is this train going to stop? Because I can't keep up with it. And I know you and I have talked a bit about kind of work ethic in the past conversations, but it's an intense career choice. And there was definitely moments prior to me leaving that career behind, which happened in October of 2019, 5 months before, I don't know if that's the exact right number, around 5 months before COVID hit. That was, at the time, the Great Resignation was not trendy. It's a bit more popular these days, but for those of us who have been building businesses for years, it just made sense to do it then. And we felt ready. I felt ready. I'd been building our business on nights and weekends and hustling hard for years, but there were some really big influences in there I just want to highlight before we go into kind of the milestones, Billy.
Yeah, sure. Please.
I mentioned my dad grew with business. He had a real estate brokerage, very successful, gave us a comfortable lifestyle as a family. And there was also a period where it kind of started to implode. And our family had to significantly downsize. And this is years ago now. This is when I was like a teenager going into my college years eventually. But it was triggered by a few key things that were quite challenging. And we refer to this in our family as like the dark decade. As corny as that sounds, it's very much how it felt. Lost my brother to cancer, my little brother. It was a long time ago. Parents got a divorce, which happens very commonly in those scenarios where there was a child. And then the dominoes kind of fell. Family couldn't provide, that was our one source of income. My dad's brokerage business was active income. And when active income stops getting provided, that's your lifeline. That there was no wonderful passive income streams, as we talk about all the time in entrepreneurship and real estate. So that was very influential when I got to witness all this. It wasn't like I was building a business myself at that time. I was kind of a kid. I was trying to navigate the early years and get and have fun with friends and go to school and do well enough there. And not great, but well enough. All that stuff. And so I look at that now and I think about how much that influenced my journey leaving tech and going into this entrepreneurship world. And it has a profound impact on my worldview. Like to the point where sometimes I wish I could kind of like turn it off. But it's net positive, I like to think, in terms of how can I do whatever I can do in partnership with my better half, who's also my co-founder, and my wife, Jennifer Marmoto. We've built this business and this life and continue to push on it because you never know, you never know. And I think that, God forbid ever something happened to me, to her, or otherwise, we want to make sure that we're in a great place and our kids are taken care of and that we're building something that can have positive impact on the world. But that was probably a bit more than you wanted on that first one.
No, well, you know what? And so the thing is what I actually love is the fact that you are sharing real life stories. Because I think a lot of times what happens, Spencer, is people think that, someone, you leave a career in tech and you move into real estate and this everything is kind of fantastic. And you talked about the unicorns and you're doing this and doing that. But the reality is life happens all the time. You lose a brother at a young age, your parents divorced. My parents divorced and married multiple times. And so that has an impact on you and it starts to shape your worldview. Right. And so the fact that you feel comfortable enough to share that with me and with the Going Long family. It's something that we appreciate because it adds a sense of realism. It's in a sense of humanity to your story. So absolutely not. So this is something absolutely appreciate. And so you can build from wherever you want. But I did want to just thank you for sharing that with us. And as you talked about, you even as a family, you recognize it as the dark decade, but you didn't stop there. It shaped your life. It shaped your worldview, and now it's helping you and Jennifer in the way that you are actually looking at how you build the life for your sons, right, and for yourself, and how you're serving. And I know we'll talk about this in a little bit more in the way that you're serving your investors today. So appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and thank you for that. And so there's probably two decision points, big decision points, as I look back at them, Billy, which has informed where I am now. Life is a series of moments, as they say, and I would just say that these couple of moments I reflect on, and at the time, I wish I could claim I had some broad worldview, life view as to the weight of that moment when I made that decision. That's not the case very often. Like you look back in hindsight and you say 2020 view, that was a big deal. Yeah. Here's the two decisions, which would be, first one was, and this is actually going into my career, and I think this could be deeply helpful for folks who are trying to decide how much they do or don't want to commit to something and take a leap. So going in to start that career, which you spoke to a moment ago, and I appreciate that intro of like going into a career in leadership in particular. I started my first job in W-2, going into account executive role, tech sales, and it was arguably too good income wise. I look back and I'm like, that was probably more than I should have made at the time, because it tainted my expectations in a way that was not necessarily healthy. Yeah. And you could probably relate to this, because you just are drawn toward that as opposed to digging into learning elsewhere. Yeah. So being a 20-something-year-old who thinks that he's got it all figured out, I decided a couple of years into that, probably a year and a half into that, you know what? I never got to travel the world. So that's exactly what I did. I quit my job. I cashed out a Roth IRA, which I so responsibly set up at the very wise age of something like 22 or 23. And I wish I'd left that in there now. I'll tell you that much. I went on a road trip around Europe for a month or two. Enjoyed myself for basically a year, and went from having ample savings to ample debt. And from there, I reconnected. I had this moment. I was literally sitting on a beach in Croatia, which will end up being my favorite city in Europe, by the way. But I would say that the moment I realized was like, you know what? I'm ready to go and commit to something that has a broader impact on other people. And if I don't have that aspect in my career, then I'm probably going to be deeply unfulfilled, regardless of the financial implications of what I'm doing. And I bought a plane ticket for way too much money. I flew back to the United States within 48 hours. I called up an old boss and mentor, and I said, please let me join your organization and put me on a leadership track. I took a job for $14 an hour working in support. And I hustled harder than I've ever hustled, worked my way up to become eventually the leader of like a 200-person facility within a matter of just a few years. And that was a grind, but that was a very conscious decision. And it was something that not everyone is. I don't look back and think like, wow, at that moment, I really had it figured out. I just knew that at that moment, I wanted to go do something that was bigger than myself. But I had to go off and mess stuff up for a while. To get there, I kind of had to go do that. So that was the first decision point. Maybe I'll take a breath there for a sec.
If on that decision point, there's something that is, I would like to dig into, and I know you have another one that you want to talk about, but there is the whole thing of, you cashed out your IRA, you traveled around Europe for a year, and then there's this thing about humility, right? Because you were seeing and doing a lot of stuff at a really young age, and then you had to think about picking up the phone and saying, hey, look, I'm going to eat some humble pie, if you'll allow me to kind of put it that way, to say, I'm going to take a job that's $14 an hour. Like, I don't think that's something that's very common for people. And so because you did that, I would love for you to share, like, what was it within you that said, you know what, I'm willing to kind of devour this humble pie to get into the track? Because a lot of people don't ever think about that or reflect on why other people do it.
Yeah. I think humble pie is exactly what I was eating. And I, I think it had to happen that way, Billy. I mean, I think that every person is wired differently. And before I say this, the disclaimer I'll give is just because it's my story doesn't mean I think it's the right story.
Yeah.
I think so many people tend to assume just because I say these things that that's how I think they should live their life. That is not my message here to them. I didn't feel I had earned it, frankly.
Gotcha.
I mean, you drop into a job, and I think a lot of folks, good on them if they go into a job and they make six figures right out the gates out of college and they feel like they're able to produce that. This wasn't a conscious thought at the time. I didn't stop there and say, I don't think I've earned this level of income and lifestyle yet. Yeah. But there was an aspect of, if I'm not balancing my give back, like if I don't feel like I'm adding material value to something, and just because the financial ramifications are good, that hollows you out, or at least it does for me. Yeah. And I think I was aware of that at least enough. And it did help that there's two mentors in particular, both former bosses, still good friends and relationships now, many years later, who made sure that I got that message loud and clear when I had to go back in and re-interview in a scary way. So, and it was insofar as like, there was a couple of very well positioned curse words in there, not directed at me, but more just kind of like you better not be messing around and you better be serious about this.
Right.
And so that humble pie was also served very, very clearly to me, to make sure that I understood how it tasted. Yeah. And from there on out, it instilled a true north, frankly. Gotcha. It was the moment of like, for folks not deep into the corporate self-development world, I'll just say, that what true north in this case to me means, what is my integrity and moral compass, not to get too preachy here, of how you can go do well, do good all at the same time, impact others well. And we all tend to veer in different ways and don't always stay on that true north path. But at least I think I had a better sense right then from that experience as to what I was willing to accept in terms of deviation from true north. So
Gotcha. No, that's it's interesting because you talk about the relationships that you had and making those connections, reaching out. You'd had the previous experience, you were making a lot of money really quickly, and then this time you felt like, okay, well, listen, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it in the right way. I want to build a foundation from the bottom up, and this was the right path for you, which is why I appreciate your sharing your story, because I'm sure that it's going to resonate with someone, probably many someone's. And your path, it may not be their path, but at least people recognize that, hey, listen, everybody's path is going to be different. And you had mentors and relationships, people that were very open, honest, and transparent with you, which helped you to find, as you talk about it, you find your true north, and that helped to get you started. And eventually it took you to a path where you were leading an organization of 200 people. So I think that's a pretty important first step. But I think there was something else that you wanted to also talk about, another decision.
Yeah. And the same theme, let's call it out right out the gates if people don't pick this up, Billy. But to me, in hindsight, this is the same theme. This is years later working. This is the where I lit the fuse mentally, I guess, on deciding I was not going to be in this type of career beyond a very short number of years. So I had to go come up with a different kind of enthusiastic strategy, something I could really put my whole mind and heart into, to eventually lead to entrepreneurship and where I'm at now. But at the time I was grinding at a unicorn startup, working 80 to 100 hours a week in the office.
Can you please repeat that? Can you please repeat that one more time? Because there are a lot of people that are watching and listening to us that sometimes they think that that's not possible, but just repeat the number of hours on average that you were working, please.
Yeah. I mean, 80 hours in an office per week. Yeah. And we're talking real hours. I mean, this isn't fluff. And so, people often think like, oh, that's a bunch of BS. It wasn't for me. I wasn't doing it over a decade, but I was doing it for a little under 2 years at least. And some people do that for decades, and good on them. They have more stamina than me. I had an infant son at that time, our first, and not seeing him for a couple of weeks because of that experience was pretty rough, as you can imagine, on the household at large. And so I think that was every decision in life, as they say, comes from a push and a pull. There's no decision that we ever make that is only one of those two things, regardless of how altruistic or how greedy people might be. It's going to be one of those two things, and it's going to be a combo. For me, that was really the push. the pull was, as interesting as this sounds, was going in towards something that I'm enthusiastic about that could add value back into the world. But the key decision milestone, Billy, to tie it back to the other milestone, was like, to go into that job, I actually gave up a 40%. I basically walked away from my 40% cash comp. I took a hit. Like, I consciously decreased my cash compensation just after getting a big promotion at a different company to go to a very early stage company deliberately, because I knew I would be working really hard. It would be the hardest work I've ever done. I'd be surrounded by people who are way smarter than I am. And they were. and I'd be outclassed every day in service of knowing I would learn more during that period of time than I could in any other mechanism, any other journey or vehicle I could do. And so I look at that experience again, and as brutally painful in hindsight, this is my tiny violin moment, because I know people have much harder, plights in life. This is a first world problem, folks. I'm totally very, very aware of that. So to be completely clear, first world problem. My corporate job is too hard and I have too many hours to work for my 6-figure job. That said, it was a conscious decision to get less money, to learn more, for more pain in the short term, for better payoff long term in terms of lifestyle, family, and fulfillment. I don't know a lot of people that will do that. I was conscious when I made that decision. I remember the exact phone call when I made that decision with someone, when I said yes to an offer. And it was a weird feeling. It was very different than the previous one, because I had a degree of self-awareness. It wasn't as crystallized as it is now. But I wanted to just highlight that.
No, and there's a lot of the things that we talk about or we listen or we see are really about pattern recognition, right? And this is a pattern that you have, and this is a story that you're sharing with us so that others can also be more informed, better informed, and also recognize maybe they have that same pattern or something similar, or maybe they're leading somebody that has that pattern, and this is going to give them better insight as to how you lead that person or create the right environment for that person that's working in the corporate role that is going to help them, live the best life when they are doing their 60, 80, or 100 hours a week. Wow, don't you just love this conversation? This is amazing. This is fantastic. And so just really quickly, I just wanted to remind you, for those of you that are looking to create more options for yourself, get there faster, and do that with long distance investing, make sure that you go to billykeels.com/7 mistakes to avoid so that you can avoid all those mistakes, get to your goals faster and sooner. Once again, that's billykeels.com/7 mistakes to avoid. Now back to the conversation. So that's really, really helpful. And so one of the other things that I love touching on, right, because a lot of what the Going Long podcast is about, right, if we pivot just a little bit, is about helping people to feel much more comfortable and confident investing beyond their backyard. Because as you know, Spencer, and you mentioned it already, like I've been living in Barcelona for the last 15 years at this point, in Europe for the last 20, and I've been investing exclusively back in the United States in a number of different asset classes, everything from small multifamily to mobile home parks to ATM machines to energy equipment and all of these different things, right? But the reality is a lot of the books, because I started just with real estate, the book said, hey, listen, you need to, if you want to be a landlord, you need to buy someplace where you actually live. There's definitely validity to that. But I fundamentally believe that it's not the only way that you can start to gain more control over your life, right? And so I'm always curious for every single guest that has also invested beyond your backyard, whether that's actively or passively, it's really to give people more insight into like, why in the world would you go against popular culture and ever think to invest beyond your backyard?
I like this topic. I run the risk of over talking, but I'll keep this concise.
Not here. You're not going to over talk it here. Not trust me, not here.
Yeah. So we'll harken back briefly just to highlight the notion of building a moat around my family, around one's family in general, and how I saw what happens when you don't, in the form of my family, my dad, and his business imploding, right? And you lose that one income stream, you are at higher risk, I would argue. So for me, it comes down to a topic of risk. I think that risk is I used to think it was just a word or a board game as a kid, right? And it is arguably, I would say, the most understudied concept, which I am a novice at still. I will always feel like I'm a novice because there are people out there that understand this quantitatively and qualitatively better than I do, no matter how hard I study for the rest of my life. But it is a discipline that people should study. It is something they should take very seriously. And I won't be preachier than this. The first property that we bought a rental in Vallejo, California. Actually, you and I chatted about it before we started recording here today, Billy. We still own it now. It is the local property, and that's about 45 minutes from our house here in Alameda. It cash flows okay. And here's what happens when you just take the advice of buying local. I mean, and you don't know how to invest for cash flow. We were ultimately realizing in our household that we wanted to build income streams. In real estate and investing terminology, that means you're investing for cash flow. You want to have income coming in from that first property. We went and bought local, and in buying local in California, that's not a pretty picture, man. I mean, we basically, it is cash flowing. It's cash flow positive, about $200 a month. In California, you can find any cash flow in a rental. That's a win.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Pretty good compared to the Sun Belt in the US, compared to many other cash flowing markets in the Midwest. We're talking $430,000 purchase price for $200 a month in cash flow. You do not call that a cash flow investment. You call that an appreciation play over the long term.
Yes.
And I bought that local. We learned that lesson. That took a whole summer to find that property with an infant son in the car. And it took over $100,000 in down payment, right? To go and do that cash. Mm-hmm. So that was one of three. We learned that lesson. We said dollar has to go further. We looked to turnkey rentals. Turnkey, I know your audience is pretty sophisticated at this point, Billy, because you've educated them so well, in addition to your guests. But that just means we were like, California, coastal markets, too expensive. $1 does not translate to enough dollars in cash flow per month. Let me go look at places elsewhere that can still get us income streams. So we got up to 5 turnkey rental properties in the Midwest. We were doing it in Kansas City specifically. We got great cash flow from these properties, but they were still a headache. Despite the fact that turnkey in this case means we buy them, they already had tenants that were with signed leases, property management built in, et cetera. And they were cash flowing for $60,000 purchase price per property at about $200 to $250 a month. I would say that that's a far better ratio for cash flow investing. It absolutely deserves a chuckle because of the sheer evolution from step 1 to 2. Third step would be, oh my gosh, it turns out you still have to manage these properties even though they have a property manager. Also turns out when people say go buy these properties because they're so, the cash flow is great, we didn't fully understand yet the notion that there's other fees, that there's other expenses. Like when a tenant leaves, that's not cheap. People don't put that into their calculators a lot of times. And if they do, they way undercount it, certainly for C-class. And so we went through that journey. We were like, man, this is still not passive enough. We want to eventually be fully passive in our lives. It's not happening immediately because we still like doing the work that we do. And we have a business and people we serve. But we moved on. We actually sold that portfolio of properties. In parallel, we had been also starting to invest in something far more passive from our perspective. We found private funds and we found syndication investments. And so we started investing in apartment deals and eventually storage and now other stuff too. And so that has been our journey now. We invested in our first one was also in the Midwest. Our first LP, limited partner investment in a syndication, and it already exited. Really great outcome on it. And we're so pleased we went down this path, Billy, because that's what passive means to me now. Like I think a lot of folks tend to say there's no such thing as like an income stream with a truly passive investment. Of course, you do diligence on the front end. Every once in a while, someone pops out of the woodwork, either on a forum or internet or otherwise, and they say nothing's fully passive. Well, duh. It's not like it shows up in your account without any work or effort or setting up anything and diligence and all that. But from an investment perspective, you better believe this is the first fully passive thing that I'd found investment wise, and that has served us very well. That's how we got to kind of the current investment focus that we have, not saying goodbye to holding hard assets, and absolutely still a fan of single family rentals. It's not a myopic thing. And in great investing is an and, not an or, in my opinion. Despite what you might read on the internet, there is not a single vehicle that people should myopically focus on for their whole portfolio. At least in our portfolio, I can't give advice to folks on that. I just say for our own portfolio, it's never going to be a single asset class, and it's never going to be a single property type or strategy. So that's kind of how we got there.
Yeah, and so just helping us understand your own, evolution and the way that you have grown as an investor, the way that you are also helping others to recognize. I mentioned it earlier before. Like I started in very small single family, and I was doing all of this actively, and then I bought a mobile home park, and then like I was. Then I found out about passive investing. Like I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I was a busy professional. I was doing all this stuff, and I was, making very, very nice bonus checks and all that other kind of stuff. I wish I would have found out about passive investing before, because it would have really probably changed things. But then all of that experience helps to make you a better investor, and ultimately helps you to be a better listener and be much more effective in the way that you're also helping other people today, right? And so, and I guess, and speaking of which, like, because you have, like, one of the things that I love about your story, right, is that you know what it's like to lead a larger organization. We talked about 200 people, but I do want you to talk about this, right? Because you know that I've worked across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I have had global roles in the company that I was working with, and I would love for you to share your perspective, because we do have a lot of high-paid professionals that are working across different time zones and different teams with different disciplines. But what did that experience, maybe if you could touch a little bit on that experience, what that experience was, and then how is that corporate experience that you had, how does that actually help you to be a much more effective educator and syndicator today?
Oh, it's really a really fun 2-hour, 3-hour podcast on itself. I mean, I feel like this is the conversation.
I think we could probably talk about this for a really, really long time.
Yeah. Well, and also I have so many questions I haven't even gotten through with Billy and other conversations yet, because I look at you in such a positive, complimentary way as like some kind of the equivalent of like a corporate James Bond, because I've never traveled that much internationally for my roles. And I've worked with teams internationally, but that's a full compliment there, Billy. I think you're an international man of mystery. I think, quick gripe. I think that the online investing community, or just the real estate investing community at large, oftentimes, although this is rapidly changing as people have been moving into it more from W-2 careers that are well established, I think there is still a very inaccurately applied stigma, said another way, a bad judgment call on the notion that W-2 careers are bad inherently. I think that is wrong. And
I agree with you. I need to say that you and I share this passion. It's just, sorry. So, but yes, I completely agree with you. So many positive things that you can learn from corporate career and things like that. So, but go ahead.
Well, and also let's just stop let's pause on the quick comment that if someone wants to run with the notion that experience matters above all, which has got to be the most overplayed thing, which clearly I agree with in real estate, you can't just pick and choose when you use it. Experience in life from person to person partnerships, working with other people, communicating with other people, compromising with other people. That's literally what you're doing every single day when you're an organization of 10, 20, 30, 500,000, 10,000 people and up. You're learning how to communicate and empathize and actively listen and all these, it sounds like fundamental, but I got to tell you, I don't know what it's like to build 20 different businesses like a serial entrepreneur that's never gone in the corporate world. And I have a deep and crazy respect for that, because I can't relate.
Right.
I've launched my own business. On the flip side, they have no idea what it means to go and collaborate with people across 7 time zones and do what you do, Billy. I mean, like, that's why I try to make no assumptions about what I do or don't know going into a relationship build. And also I want to fully acknowledge that, like, everyone has different strengths, and that's why partnerships are so key. Yeah. And so that was enough soapboxing. Hopefully I didn't offend anyone there in the audience, but I just wanted to say, like, to double down on the fact that it's all good. All experience is good experience. And because it helps move us forward, open our worldviews. And I completely think that people in the W-2 world are well served because of frameworking, particularly. Yeah. I think you get the people side, and we just harped on that, I think, together a little bit, me primarily, sorry about that. On the other side, the value of frameworks. And what I mean by that, as a guy who is still very much a novice, and from my perspective, compared to some of the brilliant people that I've worked with in the corporate and startup world in particular, you could framework anything. It was a quote from one of the founders that I was fortunate enough to work under. And what that really means is, like, the world is vast and confusing and disorienting. And the best way to make great decisions is typically to do them slowly. You got to make good, big decisions slowly. You don't have time to do that. I mean, who has endless time? And so how do you make great decisions quickly? You make great decisions quickly by creating a framework. And it's a framework, and it sounds ambiguous for people, and probably like, what the hell are you talking about? It just means make your criteria. Like, if I'm going to go buy a property, that's a very tangible thing. Let's go set the criteria for what we're comfortable with for the target returns, for the purchase price range, for the condition of the property, for the market, for the sub-market, for all of these things. If you're going to go hire someone, what the job is. Hopefully, you start with that first. Yeah. Ideally, you start with that first, yes. And then you find the person. Those are just frameworks. It's frameworks for property acquisition, frameworks for hiring a person, frameworks for building a company, frameworks for a division of a company, for frameworking. And so I've said that word so many times, it's losing meaning. But that's kind of the point I wanted to make about frameworks.
And this is one of the things. So, because I guess this is my show, so I can say that some of the things that I want, I guess, every once in a while. But in respecting, because you are a humble person, and one of the major strengths, right, that I recognize that you have is being able to understand not just process, but also being able to understand frameworks, as you talked about, and being able to be an active listener. And so you have loads of experience in from the things that you've done from a sales environment, being able to influence, being able to understand. And then when you're able to also package that up into a framework, which makes things simple to understand for others who want to achieve a goal or a benefit. And this is one of the main strengths that I recognize in you as well, because of the vast experience that you have, and because you have this ability and knack to be able to put things into frameworks and into simple structures. You're able to then go out and help people understand, wow, this is actually going to help me get to the goal, whatever that goal is, whether it's freedom of time, having more control over your time, or geographic freedom, whatever the case may be. And this is a major strength that you have, right? And so I know you say that you're being very humble, so I just want to make sure that also comes out, because it is a major strength that you have. And so with that, I kind of want to pivot a little bit. So you've talked about some of the different spaces that you've found where you are enjoying building this business, and you're building this with your wife, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But maybe you could talk to us a little bit about where are some of the different areas that you have found that you are enjoying, and also these are the areas where those investors that you're helping today, they're really looking to get the most help, whether it is appreciation, whether it's cash flow, because it ties into some life dream that they have or some life goal that they have.
Yeah. This is such a timely question. And thank you for making me blush in the nice words, Billy. I appreciate that. And you already know the feelings.
Just trying to do my job. Just trying to do my job.
Butter up the guest. No, it is really appreciated. We just actually held a small event, and it was for investors, and we were kind of just testing into that. It was just outstanding. It was so fun. And it was so fun and rewarding, particularly during 2 years of COVID, at the end of 2 years of COVID, because I hadn't met some of these people face to face. And that was such a trip in a positive, wonderful way. And then getting like these thoughtful, personal notes from them afterwards, because I think in the time leading up, you talk to these investors, and it matters to me deeply that they feel like we understand and I understand what they're trying to solve for here. What most folks are looking for, as simple as it sounds, is they want to have optionality, and they want to have, time freedom, which I think is thrown around a lot. And I think it's something I also aspire to, of course. But I think intentional time is probably more what people are trying to get at. Because I mean, my hope would be most people out there will get to the stage that I hit recently, which was actually not that enjoyable at first, frankly. And you might relate to this, Billy, which is if you go and it goes well, if you build a business, if you start an endeavor, you get what you want, the financial outcomes are there. Suddenly, you've got time to work on anything you want. Think of how terrifying that is. Yeah. Everyone focuses on, I want the money. And by the way, if you focus on the money, you're not going to get the money most times.
Never.
I mean, some people can pull that off. I can't. I have to focus on the people and solving meaningful problems that are bigger problems for people that I actually want to interact with. And then the financial outcomes will come. But all preachiness aside, I will just say that people are looking for intentional time. And intentional time well spent. Typically, that means with family, but also that means building something of meaning. Could be a business, could be charitable actions, could be community focused. I think right now more than ever, there is a yearning for that from so many people. I mean, there is. I mean, definitively, there's a yearning for that globally because, particularly in the more restricted places that I know that you and I are living through in our respective geographies right now. And so that is what people are looking for. I think the way that they get there is very different depending on the investor, because at its most fundamental, asset classes aside, investment vehicles aside, I love boiling things down to, before someone makes an investment, myself included, I look at, is it a cash flow thing? Yeah. Like, do I need income, or am I looking for growth? Or a blend. Most people, you ask them, they haven't thought that far ahead, which is absolutely fine. And they say, I want both. And be like, got it. Yeah. Is it tied to a goal? And that's where most people, I think, kind of eventually get to, once they hit that point where they actually know the difference, and because they've made an investment or two, and they're thinking like, oh, growth, meaning I have capital, I want to make that capital bigger, versus cash flow, which is I have capital, I want to turn that capital into income. That's it, and everywhere in between. And so how do those two things align to someone getting intentional time well spent?
Yeah. Well, and I love how you broke that down. I wonder if also too, because one of the things I used to hear that a lot, the growth or the income or the cash flow. But one of the things that I also hear a lot, and maybe it's just it's a byproduct of the number of the people that I'm speaking to, which are typically very high paid sales executives in the software space for whatever reason. I've also been speaking to a lot of people recently who are in the professional services, so doctors and lawyers, and they typically are making a lot of money, but about anywhere between 40 to 50% of it, they never actually it never makes it to their home, because typically their Uncle Sam is keeping a large portion of that. And so one of the things they talk about a lot is, okay, what also can I do that becomes much more tax efficient? It's something that I didn't initially hear a lot about, but more and more I talk to people that are trying to figure out, okay, well, what is out there that can actually help me not just to make more of the money, but actually to be able to keep more of the money? And I guess just at a very high level, if that's also something that you are hearing more and more of, or do you get a lot of that as well?
Oh gosh, again, wonderful topic. I used to glaze over at the thought of taxes and the word taxes. And this is coming from a guy who spent, my first big company experience at Intuit for 5 years, where they make TurboTax. So keep that in mind. I still thought it was inherently the topic, like the software was interesting. The topic, I don't know. Now I think it's deeply interesting. Yeah. And I think any sales professional and any W-2 professional, but particularly those that are bonused heavily, man, oh man, you should get interested in this topic. Find a way, find a way to get interested. Quick disclaimer, I'm not a CPA nor a tax professional, yada, yada. Please don't take this as advice.
Yeah. And I'll even say this is just because I'm glad that you said that. So what Spencer and I are talking about here are always just life examples and just sharing experiences. In no way, shape, or form is Spencer nor am I giving any type of tax advice. We're just talking about topics that, whether we hear them or not. So sorry, I also thought I would add that there.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Because people should also not be doing TurboTax. I mean, I don't want to say after a certain point in wealth building, you need a CPA. Point blank.
Yes, and this is part of the team, right? This is because we talk a lot about that. What is the goal that you're trying to get? What is the benefit that you're looking to achieve? Where is the location that you believe you have the highest probability of achieving that goal, that benefit? And then the third step is really being able to build out your world-class team. And that does not just mean get your syndicator, get your operator, get your broker. It means building out the team, having your legal professional, having your tax professional, having your insurance professional, all of the people that are going to best advise you so that you ultimately can make the best decision for yourself, your context, and what you want your future to look like.
Yes.
And then afterwards, whether you buy energy equipment or you buy self-storage or you buy something else, well, it should all fit in. The team understands it. They understand the location, and it ties into what you are trying to achieve.
Completely. Oh gosh, you hit on so many wonderful threads that I hope people pull on there, Billy, because the notion that got us into this particular topic as well, when you segued us there, is like, the income level that you have, and this is fundamental for folks, but like hopefully it doesn't take it as an ego hit. I used to assign this to prestige, which inherently matters that much. We're on not just video.
That's okay. Hey, listen, this makes it really easy. Go check out the video version, everybody, because Spencer just kind of gave a little notion, and we're not going to tell you what it is. You got to go check out the video version.
Cool. Okay, great. So, my bonuses used to go half to Uncle Sam. Yep. I do believe in taxes as a necessary function in society, and I think everyone should be paying the ones they owe, myself included. But bonus professionals and sales professionals, and we are paying the highest, and some of the highest for those that are in the W-2 workforce. And so income, earned income, is not the most tax efficient way to generate income streams. And so it occurred to me, like, how can I go and start building other income streams, whether it's from investments that produce income themselves, and also just owning hard assets. There's other ways to generate income that is not taxed so heavily, because this is a platitude and a quote. It's probably a Kiyosaki quote. I can't even remember, because I've talked about Kiyosaki and we all have read about it so many thousands of times. And it's a fundamental book. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is what I'm talking about. Can't get out of a single real estate conversation without talking about it, of course. It's more about what you keep, and whether I liked it or not, I would have been really upset probably in my 20s if someone walked up to me fresh after I got my big new 6-figure promotion and someone said, this has nothing to do with how wealthy you're going to be. It has a lot more to do with how you figure out how to hang on to your wealth and grow it once you get it. There's people making a lot less money than I was who have far more wealth than I do now. And good on them, because they are wise and they are thoughtful and they are patient and making probably really good decisions about how they grow that wealth and get more income streams into their household over time. I'm there now and I'm always learning, but I would say that that's where people, if nothing else, go focus there. Go focus on how you can learn and educate yourself about how income is far less relevant for wealth building than figuring out how to keep what you're making.
Yeah, and that's why people are listening to the words that you're talking about, and not just the way that not what income you're earning, but the way in which you earn your income is extremely important, and something that I didn't learn until way, 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 way later in life. And it's something that my 10-year-old child explained to me last year in a podcast episode. I think it was episode 100. He talked to me and broke down what passive income was all about, because I had no idea until I was 40 some odd years old. Anyway. So a couple things, Spencer, eventually we have to get into the going long final 3, but we're not going to get there just yet, because very quickly, I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about Madison Investing, how you are helping people today, and typically who is the person that you find yourself helping more frequently than not?
Yeah. So Madison Investing is our company. It's our investing group led by Jennifer and myself. Of course, we have a team behind us as well, but we help connect folks with private investments that are vetted. Vetted in this case means we've actually invested our own money in them before. There's a couple more sub bullets there, but out of the sake of time, I'll just say it's been an absolute privilege to work with so many people, and just at this point, having folks that we work with refer others in now. And so, we do focus on real estate. That is our primary focus in terms of assets. We like, multifamily apartments, a lot of the same asset classes that you also are an enthusiast for, Billy. And that has just been a wonderful, wonderful experience of connecting with folks, educating them, helping them go off and carve out their own financial destinies. And so Madison Investing is the company.
All right, fantastic. And I know it's MadisonInvesting.com, I believe. They can find out more, and you'll get a chance to tell them more ways to connect with you here pretty soon. But the thing is, Spencer, we got to get to the going long final 3. We're at the going long final 3, but the thing is, I'm never going to ask you, because I never ask any of our guests, and today you are our special guest, the going long final 3, unless you tell me that you're ready. So are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
I knew that was going to be the answer. Yes.
Billy knows I'm ready.
Here we go. So we started with you over in Alameda Park, California. And I'd like to bring it back to this side of the pond. You've kind of already told us some places that you like. Well, you spent a year hanging around Europe and stuff like that. But I would love for you to share with me and the Going Long family, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited, and I'm going to guess you probably visited, or is still on your bucket list to visit?
Yeah. That brief story I told earlier at the beginning about me having a moment of revelation sitting on a beach and journaling of all things. I wasn't a big journaler then. I am now. Was in Split, Croatia.
Yeah.
That was in Split, Croatia. I spent a criminally small amount of time in Croatia, and that was like the last country we went to on a big trip. It was absolutely beautiful. That was on like a small island, of which there are many around those places. Just stunning.
Yeah, Adriatic's beautiful. I've still not been to Croatia. I've been to 86 countries, but still not been to Croatia. And everyone talks about Split. And so there's another vote for Split. And so we're going to add it. And now it's time to get to question number 2 of the Going Long Final 3, which really has to do a lot with successful people that I have been very fortunate to come across. And of course, Spencer, I consider you to be someone who is very successful. And, one of the things that I recognize from people that are very successful, typically they're much more successful than most people because they do things right the very first time. And so then it allows them to accept. I do that every single time. Oh my gosh, I do it every single time. But it's kind of a joke, an inside joke with me and the Going Long family. And so the thing is here, everybody makes mistakes, Spencer. Everybody, and especially really successful people. But the thing is, and this is no joke, because the other one was kind of a joke. But the reality is people that are very successful, they do one thing very, 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 very differently. And that is every single time that they have a mistake or they make a mistake or you call it a learning opportunity or whatever you want to call it, especially when they're relevant mistakes or learning opportunities, they really take a moment to reflect, to stop, to think. And most importantly, after they think about the mistake, they then put tactics, strategies, or actions in place to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening to them again. So what I would love for you to share with us is not the mistake, not the experience, not the actual experience itself, but what is the one lesson that you know that the Going Long family needs to hear today to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening to them?
Oh, I was smiling as you said that, Billy, because it is just so key. It sounds so basic, and some people that don't do this are probably sitting there going, "What are they talking about?" I totally stop and reflect and be like, "Well, I used to think I did too, not the way I do now." And the mistake I made previously, and this isn't like a moment; it's more like the lack of a habit, is thinking that you learned something because you acknowledge that it occurred is different. This is my realization. I'm not preaching to people. This is my own self-critique and something I've worked on and always consciously work on now. Thinking that just because I know something occurred and it was under my control and I could have mitigated it, could have done better. I messed up. I learned, I failed forward. The difference between failing and failing forward, as it were, meaning learning and building a path, is literally taking the time to make it a work activity, in my opinion, and like writing it down. I have to write stuff down. If I don't write it down, I'm not really translating that to forward action. And that's not second nature to me. I look at the way that, note takers, true note takers, and I mean like the ones who got it all dialed in and they're really organized. I am not a natural note taker. I have to work hard at it. And I have to do it early in the morning before the kids wake up, all that stuff. Now I take the time to do that type of stuff when I mess something up, because that's how I learn and move forward. I wasn't sure if you wanted a specific moment necessarily, but that's the habit that I used to lack. And if I don't compel myself to do it, I'm not really mitigating anything in the future. And so I think that's got to be it.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And so being able to actually be active in your thinking and your writing, your scribing, and making sure that you are writing things down, because that will help you from not just from failing, but then failing forward, which I think was fantastic. So with that, it brings us to the very last of the Going Long Final 3, and this is about helping us to fill our minds with knowledge. So I would love for you to share one book. What is one book that you would share with the Going Long family today, Spencer?
It's got to be Essentialism. Essentialism by Greg McKeown. That is one that I think I've gone through 3 times, probably due for a 4th over the years. And the reason why, briefly, is because it hits on the value of prioritization. No matter who you are in the world, celebrity, athlete, corporate badass, or otherwise, we all have the same number of hours in the day. Of course, we have different starting points in terms of resources, expertise, and beyond. Same hours in the day. Prioritization is really what holds most people back. Over a long enough time scale, it's prioritization and being able to say no. And that's what that book actually literally arms you with, is it tells you socially graceful ways to say no, because that's where we all mess it up. And man, sometimes grabbing that coffee, going to that bar with a friend that you really like and appreciate, might have to say goodbye to that for a 2 to 3 year period while you do this business building or endeavor building or company building. That'll change your entire life. And so how do you say no? Essentialism, killer book.
All right. Essentialism. That's another vote. Wow, man. These conversations, this one in particular has flown by. I'm sitting here starting to think wow, you were telling us about your dad and his brokerage for 30 years. And you as a teenager, you're kind of there and you're working and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm hanging out at open houses. I don't want to tell my cool friends in the Silicon Valley area that that's what I'm doing. So you kind of kept that low to yourself, right? And you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is, I don't really want to talk about this. And the things that I'm saying, I don't really actually want to even be any part of this. And so rather than diving and moving towards that, you decided to run away from that and go into the kind of the cool hip thing to do, which was get into the whole IT thing. But even before that, you were kind enough and vulnerable enough to share with us your dark decade and the things that happened with you and your family, your parents' divorce, you're losing your brother. And that really also was that started to help to formulate your worldview and the things that you're doing. And then you also shared not just, taking the time off and going over to Europe and realizing you were making way too much money early on. You're making a whole lot of money. And it's hey, I'm just going to cash out my Roth. I'm going to go over to Europe. I'm going to hang out for a while. And then you realize there's something missing here. And you were vulnerable enough and humble enough to pick up the phone, get on the phone with some mentors and kind of get started at the bottom. And then after over a number of years, you were able to get back to leading organizations and doing that across multiple time zones, multiple places. You were part of unicorn companies that were starting. You talked about some of them into it. And I know there are a number of others around the financial space, and eventually realized, hey, listen, man, even though this is kind of cool, I don't want to make the same mistakes that happened to my dad. I don't want to be really dependent on one source of income. So I got to do something else. And this whole area of real estate came up, and you started, having some successes there, and you bought the place down the road in Vallejo. And since then you've even continued to go and said hey, look, I'm not going to put $430 to get $200K a month. I could go somewhere else like Kansas City and get something much better than that. And wow, and then I can even go somewhere else. And eventually I've got to not just do this, I've got to manage the managers, because ultimately this is what is going to help me and my family get closer to our goals and our dreams. You did that. You continued, you left the corporate career. Now you're not only building your own business, you're helping other people to get to their goals and their dreams. And you're doing that with Madison Investing. And I know that there's so many people that are IT people and busy professionals are wow, man, Spencer's story is super awesome. I really appreciate all the things he shared with us. And I want to get in touch with him. Now, I know that I can get in touch with you really easily, Spencer, but I would love for you to share with the Going Long family, what is the best way for us to reach out to you to find out more about what you're doing, more about what you're doing at Madison Investing, so that we can connect with you, man? What's the best way? Help us out.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Billy, for that really, really kind, read back. I mean, and just, you're such a great listener, such a great person to speak with. It's just a blast. So our website for Madison Investing is madisoninvesting.com. You can reach out to me there. You also just shoot me an email if you'd like. It's spencer@madisoninvesting.com, but it's really just go to the website. It's probably the best place for info and how to connect with me, book some time on my calendar. I'm happy to chat. And would love to hear from folks. And this has just been again, fast hour. Cannot believe that my 4 and 7-year-olds are not bust through this door just now, Billy. Like there's no childcare this week.
I kind of want him to come in now.
I know school's out, and there's no childcare. So something was serendipitous here. I mean,
they're reading books or something. They're reading books. They're looking forward to seeing you. So, well, listen, Spencer, I appreciate you deciding to invest your time with me, sharing your story, your experiences with the Going Long family, man. And like I said, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Billy. It's been an absolute blast. And hopefully at some point we can actually connect in person from the other sides of the world.
We will do that. We will definitely do that. So if you give me just 2 seconds, I just want to say a couple words to the Going Long family, and then we'll wrap things up. So listen, Going Long family, what can I say? Today's conversation, experiences that Spencer's had, it's fantastic. He's given you very clear strategies. He's talked to you about some of the different tactics that he's done. He shared some of the stories with you so that you can be inspired to continue to go out and take action. You're going to get to a point where you're going to fail. You're going to fail forward. You're going to make your notes. You're going to continue to grow and learn. And in the meantime, I know that I'm looking forward to welcoming you back on the very next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Wow. Don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? When I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.